previous discussion, also with Spiros on the project, an idea that started almost 3 years ago from teens that approached the president of the Democracy and Culture Foundation, Achilles, and asked them, hey, we want to have our own ADF. We want to have a part in this conference representing ourselves and not through simulations of conferences like the UN or the European Parliament. So almost 3 years ago, we heard them at the Democracy and Culture Foundation and created a parallel session from teens to teens for teens. The adults sitting behind, we just provided the space, the infrastructure, and a young facilitator who moderated the discussion between the youth. Today, at King George Hotel, just next door, there are 45 school pupils from different parts of the world, and with the collaboration and the support of INOC, the European Network of Ombudspersons for Children, and the Network for Children's Rights, and a school from northern Greece, Ptolemaida, teens are deliberating on a topic, and they will come up with their own policy recommendations that they will present to the plenary on Thursday, so stay tuned. Now, we have with us 2 members of our alumni, Angelina and Panagiotis, and 2 new members, Nahia and Dagur. As teens discuss and propose their ideas, we thought of asking them to discuss them directly with the members of the parliaments, those that have the power to include them into the decision-making, and they are sitting in the first table. We have 4 members of parliaments, from Greece, from Ghana, from the UK, and from Canada, that they will introduce later. Last year, teens extensively discussed the topic of citizen participation, as more and more people are feeling that their governments are disconnected from the daily lives and feel powerless to impact their discussions. So I would like to ask you to present the policy recommendation you came up, and then starting a discussion with asking your questions to the members of the parliament.
Thank you, Elina. Hello, everyone. We are very happy that you're here. I am Angelina.
I'm Panagiotis.
I'm Dagur.
And I'm Nahia. And we are here to talk about youth participation in politics. And before we begin, we want to clarify something. When we talk about youth participation in politics, we're not just referring to voting rights, okay? It's about young people having an active, everyday role in shaping the political landscape. Real representation where their voices are truly considered and acted upon. It's about creating opportunities for youth to engage with lawmakers, as we're doing right now, influence policy, and ensure they aren't sidelined from the political sphere.
So, last year's ADF thematic for the teen panel was centered around the fact that many people feel that their government is disconnected from their daily life, and they, as citizens, feel powerless to impact its decision. Now, we focused on answering the following question. What would be the best way to resolve the disagreement between lawmakers and the citizens who are advising them? Now, on behalf of the Children Committee, we came up with the following recommendations. First of all, establishing youth councils at the national and at a local and national level. Second of all, enhancing teen participation in voting procedures, and introducing child rights impact assessment procedures in all decision-making processes, and include children in those councils.
We also talked about assessing the performance and ranked stakeholders and decision-makers, introducing procedures that formally involve children in parliamentary decision-making, set up digital platforms to ensure accessible communication and participation of children in the above processes, enhance legislation to protect children's human rights, defenders from attacks, and lastly, ensure transparency and accountability in decision-making. Now, in proposing solutions, we must also address the root causes of the lack of youth participation and interest in politics. Because we must admit, we acknowledge that many young people are completely uninterested in politics. And while many here might disagree with me, I certainly wouldn't be satisfied if all 16 years old were suddenly able to vote from tomorrow. As we've seen in school student councils, and adult elections as well, but that's an issue for another time, voting isn't usually based on responsible criteria. But this isn't because young people lack the ability to express political views or represent themselves. It's a reflection of an educational and political system that underestimates teenage representation and fails to promote critical thinking, political awareness, and human rights. Of course, young people will distance themselves from politics if they feel unrepresented, detached from their government, and if their schools don't encourage them to debate, question, or engage in political discussions. That's why I want to ask you. I don't want to generalize. I don't want to say that the educational and political system is like that in all countries. So, in your opinion, does the educational system in your country prioritize critical and political thinking? And how do you believe schools should prepare students for responsible political engagement?
Thank you, Angelina. Thank you, Panagiotis. Now I give the floor to Iain Walker, my collaborator, who is moderating the parliamentarians.
Very little of me. We're going to find which MP would like to put their hands up to take that question. And I'm looking eagerly for volunteers.
Hello. Hello, my name is Nefeli Chatziioannidou. I'm a member of the Hellenic Parliament. I'm the youngest female member of the Parliament, so I can relate a lot. So in Greece, as you presented with your data as well, we have, for instance, local youth councils. We promote the open discussion. We even have in the committees of the Parliament representatives from organizations that may represent also children. However, I cannot tell you 100% that we can represent what you need and what you want. And I believe that this starts from exactly the school, because we do not, in our educational system, a lot of years now, we didn't have critical thinking lessons. We didn't promote civic education, for instance. So we cannot expect at the age of 16, for instance, or 17, the teenagers to start expressing themselves correctly or to want to participate in all this process. Even the language we use a lot of times in politics, it's very far from what young people can listen to, even the processes and the procedures. So I believe that we have to go back, very back, at school, even in the kindergarten, when we start discussing about how we act towards the environment and towards society. And then develop it step by step so we can reach the teens and so the teens can be really involved and really interested. So this is my answer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so by way of introduction, I'm Dickson Kissi from Ghana. With regards to youth disconnection or governance or democracy disconnection with the youth, I think that I'll cite the example of recently TikTok CEO meeting the senators in the US, and I'm wondering how many youth watched that engagement. Because TikTok really, forgive me, is consumed, I think, largely by young graduates and the youth. So I would plead somewhat with the youth to be, first of all, interested in things that matter to them when it comes to governance. So if the American senators are going to stop TikTok from operating in America, I should see some youth engagement. The youth rising up, making comments, because that impacts what the youth enjoy. So you said something monumental. It's not about voting. You don't vote necessarily at 16, but you want to figure out how you can participate. So my only thing is that we will do our best, because we have daughters and sons who are within that age bracket. We discuss with them. Sometimes, and let me share with you, Harry Potter became Harry Potter because a youth told her dad that invest in it. So you have a huge stake through parents. You have a huge stake through letting your own voice also being heard. and engaging in things that matter most to you, the youth. We are also going to do our best. Thank you very much. I hope I've answered.
We have a second round of questions, but if some, yes.
I don't want to cut off your applause, Dickson. That was... No. Now, I just wanted to push a little bit, though. Did any of the members hear something? It was a very specific request. It was a request for procedures. It wasn't an airy-fairy request. It was a request for procedures and being heard. Is that something you can see in your committee process? Is it something you can see through the legislature? Or do you hear something where you want to push back on the group and ask them to consider something new? Nathan, I might come to you.
Hi, I'm Nathan Cooper. I'm the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, which is a subnational province in Canada. I once was a young politician. That was a decade ago when I got elected. And I was the second youngest speaker in Alberta's history. And I think one of the challenges that we all face is, you ask the question, how are schools preparing our citizens for active engagement? And I think we all need to ask ourselves the question, where does the line fall between personal responsibility and getting engaged and relying on the government to prepare us for engagement? And so I think it's something that politicians could learn a lot from students, where you feel the role of the government is in preparing you, and where is the level of personal responsibility for your engagement in the process more broadly.
Thank you.
Mayor?
We
Can proceed with the second.
If you want to, Angelina, reply. But
very shortly. Surely engagement is one thing, and we do engage in politics, I mean, through discussions, even in a coffee shop, right? In MUN, simulations. But another key word is representation. And what we're contemplating here is, how are we represented actually when it comes to making decisions, when it comes to legislative power? Like, no matter how much we engage in politics, we have no power, and we feel like the decisions that are being taken are not considering our opinions and our feelings on the matter. Would you guys like to proceed with your questions?
Yes. Dagur. Yes, go on.
So, I want to continue with this topic a little bit. I want to talk about the voting age lowering down to 16. Okay, so there are mixed thoughts about lowering to 16. Personally, I don't agree because I think we should start being educated at 16 by politics instead of choosing to vote at 16. But what I want to ask the politicians is, what do you think about the voting age being at 16? And I ask, is there a negative thought on it? Is there a positive thought on it? Or is it both? So that's what I want to ask you. If somebody...
And Nahia, probably you want to ask something, and then we give the...
I think Panagiotis also wants to ask
Okay, Panagiotis.
So yeah, I want to get from you guys.
And Nahia, yes?
Okay, and my question does not regard that topic. My question is, how can we ensure that the views of children from different realities, this being children with disabilities, from different colors, families, not just the ones who can afford an education or a good quality education, how can we ensure that their point of view and their realities are being taken into account when we are making decisions that will directly affect them and their lifestyle and their future?
So, two very direct questions. Voting age of 16, pros and cons. I'd like to do a rapid fire round through all four of you. Ed, can I put you on the spot?
Well, we have a new government. You guys got to make a speech. I'm going to make a quick speech. I was elected at 37 to the British Parliament, but I got out and I'm now in the House of Lords, which thankfully is not elected. It's a job for life. Nobody can vote me out. And the quid pro quo is that I'm not allowed to vote in a general election. So I'm the only person in this room who has lost the right to vote, which is quite an interesting position to be in. I think that in terms of engaging young people with policy, I think we can go down a rabbit hole thinking about councils and so on and so forth. We have to understand the issues that really affect young people. In the UK, it's the cost of tuition fees at university, massive issue, lack of housing, and lack of job opportunities. Those are the kind of issues. However, we have a new government that is in favour of votes at 16. I'm in favour of votes at 16. Why not?
I believe that it's not a matter of age. If you are well prepared, if we create the system in order our teens to be prepared, there's no problem if it's 15 or 16. But if we do not guarantee that the teens that are going to vote, they have access to the proper information and they are properly included. For instance, in Greece, we are at the age of 17, you can vote. But this doesn't change the fact that nothing has changed in the system that we educate the new generation. And that's why we see also a huge number and an increase of absenteeism in the elections. And secondly, how you include vulnerable communities and minorities. This is the huge, let's say, goal that we have. And that's why it has to go through our public system of education in order to be able that every corner around every country can actually have access to the new tools that we're going to create in order for young people to come and discuss about their problems, in order for the lawmakers to be able to respond to the needs. Thank you.
I think this is one of the big challenges is all too often we think we lower the voting age and youth engagement, the box is going to be checked. The reality is there's lots of different groups who feel disconnected from their democracy, whether it's young people, pensioners, or everyone in between. And I think you've accurately assessed this big challenge of how do we engage with disenfranchised groups, whether it's based upon their income or minority status. And I think parliamentarians need to do a much better job of finding ways to engage in a meaningful manner. And this is the real crux, is what is meaningful. And so how do we communicate that to not just young people, but people right across the spectrum? And all too often, the voting age sort of challenge is let's just default to lowering the age. You know, in politics and in parenting, there's no prerequisites, so you don't have to be educated or engaged to do either of those things, and that includes voting.
Yeah, so I'm for voting at 16. I'm for it. I think politics is about numbers, and once your group is added, I'm very certain that things pertaining to people around 16 and below will certainly be at the forefront or the front burner for some politicians. So I'm certainly for it, because then your constituents will be taken seriously. But let's lower it and make sure you vote. Some would not also go and vote. That's another whole discussion. But we're all seeming to be for lowering the age if possible. Thank you.
And we'll come to the second question, but I just want to ask a probing follow-up. The questioner actually asked in a really balanced way, there might be some downsides. Said, I may not be in favour of it. And I do note politicians with cameras rolling tend to say nice things. None of you really wanted to touch a negative. Obviously, Nathan, you did approach it differently. For those in favour, what negatives are you concerned with but you're okay with? Does anyone want to pick that up? Dickson. Oh, sorry, I'll come in a second.
My only concern from where I'm coming from is where parents and other political leaders who are local will, as it is, force some of these 16-year-olds to vote in a certain way. That is a huge concern from where I'm from, because they will take a cue from their parents and not necessarily vote based on their conscience. And sometimes that can be a problem from Ghana.
I can't see any downsides to 16-year-olds having the vote, because There are downsides to anyone having the vote. People vote out of self-interest, ignorance, all sorts of different issues, whether they like the tie that the prime ministerial candidate is wearing. My son is not yet old enough to vote. He just missed out on voting in this election. But if he had been able to vote, he would have voted against my party, the Conservative Party, because the Prime Minister wanted to make maths compulsory until the age of 18. That may seem a very frivolous issue, but for him, it was the most important issue, and he had every right to exercise his vote on that basis.
I can say nothing else. I completely agree with you.
So while we're getting a wind-up, the last question hasn't really been touched as strongly. There's a particular set of the voiceless people, more disadvantaged, who have a difficulty having a say in our democracy. What's the initiative there? Dickson reaching.
There's one thing, though, with regards to people with disadvantage. There are many politicians who may have a daughter with some medical condition, a son with some medical condition. So we're not necessarily far removed from people with such challenges. And I think that politics, as it stands, through our work, we come into contact with all kinds of minority groups or people with different challenges or how they see the world and how we see the world. So we largely, by the time you are elected, you become an embodiment of many ideologies, many thoughts, many perceptions. And I think overall, the final work we put out largely gives huge consideration to all of these people who may or may not have a seat at the table. Thank you.
I've had 3 wind-ups. I'm back to you, Elina.
Okay. Panagiotis, one last question, and then we wrap up.
Yes, of course. So I would like to focus on the role of school regarding democracy. I recently came across the term embryonic democracy. This term postulates that school must function as what we call embryonic democracy, meaning a biocosm of daily experiences of participation and justice, starting from kindergarten. In theory, this is how me and my generation grew up. We were introduced to democracy from the first day we were able to walk. But yet, later on, we stay away from elections and we gradually become indifferent to politics. A possible explanation is that democracy is a difficult concept for a child to understand because it is very abstract. You cannot grasp it like bread, yet you can develop a feeling for it, a feeling that follows you throughout your life. Oftentimes, though, we do not appreciate that this is not given to us, and we must contribute to its strengthening in every way throughout our life. Now, my question for you is, in a world where young people are shifting towards studying sciences, how can we ensure that the concept of democracy becomes more comprehensive and popular to younger audiences? What reforms must be made to impress upon the youth that human studies related to democracy are as equally important?
One last answer.
I believe that, yes, it is as important. However, this is democracy, that you can study whatever you like, because democracy is everywhere, even to that choice of yours, to whatever you want to study, to whatever you want to do. But for me, it's the key factor for you to understand that you actually experience democracy is to travel, to see whatever other people, and educate yourself on what you really have, because as we believe that democracy is something that we have as a certain fact, it's not, and we can see that worldwide at the moment. So I believe that educating yourself with general knowledge is what it will bring you to the fact that you have democracy and how important it is.
It's a privilege to travel, though, right?
And just as a quick wrap-up, because we're getting a heavy wind-up, the question was about experiential learning. Of our 4 MPs here, who had student government at school? Who had it at university? Okay, I'm getting nods more than happiness, and I think that's where the question is. It's a show, don't tell. Maybe that's what we need to go back to. Elina?
I have many notes. I kept many notes from the discussion, and thank you both groups because you were very courageous. I keep embryonic democracy. Develop developing a feeling for democracy. That's amazing. Thank you very much all. And I would like to ask my colleague Kim Koniftaber to continue the session. Thank you.
Thank you.